Netflix. It is hard to believe that almost 30 years ago, TV stations such as Sky, ABC, HBO, and the like were such unstoppable giants in the industry. Seriously, for these companies in the late 90s and the 2000s, they were absolute juggernauts. During that time, cultural icons such as Friends, The Office, and The Wire, and even Breaking Bad were being pummeled out, being critical darlings and just absolute successes when it came to viewership. And while it's hard to explain the financial success of TV in this period, I think it's best explained by Ellis Mark. Today, if your show on a network got over 1 million views, would it be considered a decent success? However, if a show in the early 2000s got over 7 million views, then it would likely get cancelled. But that's it. Network TV was a big thing, but it is such a cell of its former self. Not just in terms of content, but also just spirit. Whenever I flip on E4 during my break, it's all just reruns of Young Sheldon and The Big Bang Theory, the latter being about a decade old at this point. Compared this to Netflix, but this continues to release new and interesting shows like Unstable, House of Guinness, and it just makes household names like E4 look so irrelevant and overly dependent on nostalgia. With that being said, what has caused network's great downfall? How did these titans of the industry get beheaded so magnificently? Here's a tip. No, it's not just Netflix. So it would be easy to point to Netflix and other streaming services as the dethroner of traditional TV, but I believe the real issue is far more complicated than that. I think the real root of the issue originates with VHS tapes. Now, for the uninformed, VHS tapes were used to record live recordings of shows or movies so one could watch them at a later date, which is super convenient for the consumer, as now you don't have to be at a specific time and place to watch something. And for a large part of the 70s and 80s, VHSs were a huge part of general TV consumption. However, by the 90s, VHSs were being totally annihilated by compact discs. But more importantly, by the mid to late 2000s, a new way to watch TV content where I have to wait for a specific time slot had arisen. On-demand play. On-demand play, at least in my opinion, was the precursor to streaming services. Essentially, on-demand play allowed you to browse all the content on your network and just play it, instead of just waiting for it to come on at a specific time. As you can see, this is essentially just a streaming service. It's actually hard to communicate what on-demand play is to a younger generation because the TV landscape is just so different now. It's generally hard to communicate the scale of the transformation. Like in the Factually podcast, Vivian Wilson but admits to being genuinely shocked to discover live TV as a child. Geez, I'm actually explaining what a newspaper strip is to a kid these days. Now, here's the thing. Network TV measures success with ratings, i.e., how many people are watching a live program at a specific time. This is like the main indicator of success. However, if someone watches a program on demand that does not contribute to the ratings, that opens up a problem. Essentially, 20 million people could watch Gavin and Stacey on demand, but only 2 could watch it on live, and TV execs could still consider it a failure. To prove that this was becoming a real issue, Alex Jones actually described this right from an online in the Joe Rogan podcast. I know Alex Jones is objectively a horrible person and a questionable source, but on this issue alone, there is a twinge of slight truth. Still a terrible person who should never be allowed back on the platform. However, at this point I was thinking, so how does Netflix come into this? Because the way I'm looking at it now, a lot of the major network studios like Sky were doing fine with live network shows and on-demand play. Furthermore, I can't help but think that if major networks were to legitimately observe on-demand data and include them in their ratings, then they would have an easier time presenting themselves as a contender to Netflix. And as I said, they already have a proto-streaming model that could potentially rival Netflix's. So what is it about Netflix that has made it the ultimate god king in TV? Is it Stranger Things? No, because Stranger Things would have to be good. But in all seriousness, Better Call Saul was airing around the same time, so I find it hard to believe that Stranger Things was pulling away all of the viewer attention. No, what I really think made Netflix the GOAT and Netflix television a forgotten ghost is cost. Jim Gaffigan once joked that streaming services are only between like $6 to $9 a month, while some Netflix charge you $500 a month. At this point, consumers had to ask themselves, am I willing to pay infinitely more for network live TV that only has the bones of a streaming model? Or should I pay less, way less, for an actual streaming service? And I think that's the real nail in the coffin. Not the fact that Netflix has more shows, and not even the fact that Netflix has necessarily better content. The consumer just can't justify the expenditure on network television anymore, when such cheaper alternatives exist. And I think most major networks realize this now. While Sky tried to market its next big show, The Death of Bruno Monroe, what its ads now are new TVs and broadband connectors. Major networks kind of realized that they had been blown out of water here. Heck, most Sky TVs and subscriptions have Netflix included, which is kind of the equivalent of Joe Biden teaming up with Trump. It's clear network television has been dethroned. It is evident by the content of channels like E4, which is repeat reruns of shows like The Big Bang Theory. It is evident by the ratings levels for most network shows nowadays. And it's evident when a new show comes along that everyone loves, you can bet that it's a streaming show. Network TV didn't shoot itself in the foot. It just waited for Netflix to take the shot.